Hi, Catherine, and welcome to the Natural Birth Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you.
I'm so happy
So
to be here.
today we're going to dive on into your natural hospital birth story that, has some story to it beforehand. So we're going to dial on back before you actually went into labor because you started your care with an OB, but then changed to a home birth, and then I think got tricked out of having your home birth. But you did have a positive, empowering, natural hospital birth that we're going to hear today, but we're going to hear the story how you ended up there. So take us back to how come you started at the OB and what made you change to, home birth um, after that?
Yeah. So I think the home birth just never even really crossed my mind. I thought, oh, that's awesome that women are able to do that, but not me. I could never do that. That's for them, but not me. It's a wonderful thing, but I could never do it. So I went ahead and was under care with the regular OB/GYN that saw me for my pap smears and all that. Just didn't really think anything of it. But as I kind of dove into listening to birth stories, and your podcast was, I mean, I listened to every single episode, and not just the birth stories, but your informational podcasts. And I realized there was so much more to it. It wasn't just, oh, you just go to the hospital and do what they say and have a baby, go home with a baby. It can be an amazing experience. And so I realized, I think I want that. So I even remember telling the OB, I want to have a natural birth. I don't want to have medication. I don't want to be induced. And he just kind of, oh, well, we'll talk about that later on. Don't worry about that. Let's just worry about, healthy baby, healthy pregnancy. We'll talk about that later. And I just kind of, that didn't sit well with me. Um, I remember thinking, well, you're the one who's doing this with me. Shouldn't we be on the same page? But I kind of went along with the pregnancy and just thought, well, that's all right. I'll make my own plan, and he can go along with it or not. So I just dove into birth stories, podcasts. I read, all the Ina May Gaskin books. Um, and it got to be around the gestational diabetes test time where I really became unhappy with the OB care. Um, I did not want to drink the orange sugary drink for the glucose test. I told him that. I said, what other options do we have? And I was actually seeing the nurse practitioner, the OB's nurse practitioner at the time, and she said, well, there's not another option. This is everyone does it.
Well,
Um,
everyone does it because everyone just goes along with it. Of course, there's options. There's the option of
mhm,
not doing it, and looking at,
mhm,
am I a risk factor for this? And there's the other
mhm,
option, which you actually test your blood sugar, like yourself, you prick your finger and you can test for a week and you see a pattern or not.
mhm,
So there's definitely
mhm.
different options. I mean, there's also the option of like drinking a juice and like just doing something, similar amount in sugar, but that's not this synthetic, disgusting glucose drink.
Mhm.
So there's many
Right.
options out there, ladies. You can pick and choose the one that suits you. But usually in the OB care or in the
Mhm.
system, there will not be choices.
Right. Right. So I actually did that. I got a glucose monitor. And she even said, she said, well, you can do it, but um, we don't know how accurate that is because we don't know if you know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, it's not rocket science. You prick your finger before you eat, after you eat, whatever. So I did that at home for a week. I think 3 or 4 times a day. I had a little log. I charted every single number, and it was always perfect. Nothing was ever out of range. I brought it back the next week to the OB, and I showed her the numbers. She said, yeah, these all look great. Your blood sugar is perfect. And she said, but we do have to go ahead and put you down for in your chart for gestational diabetes.
Excuse
And I
me?
said, exactly. I said, what, why would you do that? You just told me my numbers are perfect. And she said, well, it's just our policy. If you didn't drink the drink, you will be categorized as having gestational diabetes.
Oh my God.
And I,
What BS?
yes. And I said, well, is that going to affect, my labor? Am I going to be treated differently in labor? Is that going to pop up in my chart at the hospital when I'm in labor? Is my baby going to be taken from me to be tested? It just didn't seem right. And she reassured me, no, no, none of that will happen. And my gut just said, you can't, just don't trust them, because they're going to try and take the baby to the NICU for testing,
Yeah.
just something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the risk
Um,
is much higher because if you're labeled as gestational diabetes, they will keep, yeah, monitoring your baby. At least,
mhm,
they want to at least for 24 hours afterwards, which might mean pricking that baby's heel at least once to check for the,
mhm,
glucose levels. Potentially, I mean, it's different everywhere, so it's not like a blanket
mhm,
rule, but there's a higher risk for that, of course, if you are labeled as GDM.
mhm. So I remember leaving that appointment, and I called my husband on the way home, and I said, I can't have my baby with these people. I can't do it, And I said, let's do a home birth. And he was right away, he was on board. Um, and I think this was 36, I think it was 36 weeks. And he said, okay, great. So I had known of a midwife she actually from a neighboring town. Um, and I knew a few women who had birthed with her. So I contacted her, got set up, did my first appointment. She was just lovely. Um, right away, the appointment was very, very different from the OB. I'm sitting on this couch, having a cup of tea, just chatting, like I'm just chatting with, a friend. Um, and so I was so excited to do a home birth. Rented the birthing tub, got the home birth kit, real excited to do that. And that lasted about a week. I think it was a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then I had that high blood pressure reading. Um, and the midwife didn't right away, you know, transfer my care, but she said, let's kind of watch this. I'm a little bit nervous. And sure enough, she did end up recommending I switch back to the OB, which I was disappointed about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard to hear.
So can you tell everyone who's listening, just tell the story about the day when you went to that appointment with her and you had a high blood pressure. I want to know about how long did you sit down after arriving to have that blood pressure? What was it? Did you come from work? Were you feeling stressed about work? I want to know a little bit about the surroundings of why you think you had a high blood pressure.
Sure. So I did not actually have a high blood pressure reading at that first appointment with her. Everything was good. But my first high blood pressure reading I was at work. I worked at a nursing home at the time. Um, I'm a speech pathologist. So I, was seeing patients and doing paperwork and, just kind of a typical busy day at the nursing home. And I remember sitting down at my desk to do some paperwork, and my heart felt racy. I felt lightheaded, just overall unwell. And so I asked one of the nurses to take my blood pressure, and it was high. It was, I think, 160 over, I think it was 160 over 100, maybe a little bit less than that.
Hmm.
And so I called the midwife, and obviously, I was very stressed about that. And I think getting nervous toward the end too, toward the end of pregnancy. Um, and so I called the midwife, and she had me go into the labor and delivery ER just for them to do a little bit of monitoring, which I did. And sure enough, by the time I got there, My blood pressure readings were perfect. Baby was moving perfectly fine. Heart rate was good. They kept me there for maybe 2 hours and sent me home. Um, and then the midwife did want me to go back and see the OB, just to get some blood work done, which was all perfect. However, again, when they took my blood pressure at the OB's office, it was high. Um, and I will say I was very nervous because I was scared that I was, you know, what are they going to want to do? Are they going to want to induce me? Are they going to want me to deliver here? So I was very, very nervous. I was trying to calm myself down, trying to control my breathing, but I knew it was going to be a high reading. Um, just I think because of my nerves. Um, and of course, when you get into the office, they don't have you sit for 5-10 minutes, relax. It's like you get in there, they're already talking about induction, and we need to make sure the baby's okay, and then they take your blood pressure right away. Well, most people are probably going to have a high blood pressure reading.
So I think it's really important what you're sharing because I work with, I coach women around the world, both preparing for birth and working through anxieties or fears, but also I work with women who've had traumatic births, right? So birth trauma healing and debriefing. And I've noticed a pattern that um, women very quickly get forced into induction from having high blood pressure in the US. And I'm quite concerned about this. So,
Mhm.
when I heard you share a little bit before we started recording, that's why I really wanted everyone to hear about your story around this, is that, you're 36 weeks, you're still working. I mean, I really recommend women to, if they can, stop working before, somewhere around 34, 36 weeks is great to stop working and really relax and prepare to have a baby, right? I mean, I truly think
Mhm.
that when women are pregnant, depending on their lifestyle and how stressful their job is, really, I mean, I wish we had a world where we supported women to be fully off during their whole pregnancy and focus on actually creating new life. I mean, that's my personal humble opinion, but at least, a few weeks before birth. And, stress can elevate your blood pressure, right? And even if you're not pregnant, but even so, when you are pregnant, maybe a bit more so, like stressing in the end is not good for you. And so you had a high blood pressure there. That was quite high, like 160 over 100, around that. That's
Mhm.
really high. I would definitely,
Mhm.
recommend you going to the hospital. But then it wasn't high when you were there. So it's not
Mhm.
consistently high. It's not showing like you're having
Mhm.
hypertension. You don't have a chronic
Mhm.
hypertension. It's going up and it's going down. And then
Mhm.
you got high blood pressure readings when you were at the OB's office. Again, you shared, there was talk about
Mhm.
induction, which is also ridiculous for just like a one-off high blood pressure. Absolutely ridiculous because
Mhm.
we're not seeing a pattern here. And then you told me before we started recording that you actually checked at home and you were fine when you were at home, but
Mhm.
every time you went to the OB, you got a high blood pressure.
Mhm.
And there's actually a condition called white coat syndrome. It's an actual thing. It's recognized in the medical field that people can feel anxious and stressed by the white coats, so the doctors, and they get high blood pressure because of it. So they get high blood pressure
Mhm.
just when they go in to the hospital or to the OB's office, maybe the midwife's office if it's, a clinical area, or just that feeling of authority. Everyone's different, right? So
Mhm.
I've been a midwife before for for women who've had anxiety, for example, or have had white coat syndrome. So I would have gone to their home. We would have sat and chatted for half an hour before I took their blood pressure, for example, right? To avoid this, white coat syndrome from happening even in the
Mhm.
home. So it sounds to me like, from what I hear you telling me, is that you didn't have chronic hypertension. If you had chronic
Mhm.
hypertension, you would have been offered some medication for that first and foremost, not induction. I want everyone to
Mhm.
hear that. Like the first line is not induction. Let's halt the freaking inductions, please. Like the first
Mhm.
protocol is not induction. The first protocol would be like, okay, if you actually did have chronic hypertension, let's look at a medication then that can lower that. Because yes, of course, like you don't want to have 160 over 100. That's not good. It's not
Mhm.
good for the perfusion of blood from the placenta to the baby. It can, it definitely
Mhm.
can have bad side effects. your midwife did the right thing. She sent you to the hospital. They took bloods and, essentially they checked for preeclampsia, right? Because that's what we're worried about if a pregnant woman has high blood pressure. You didn't have that. You had nothing. You had
Hmm.
just one off and then a few, high blood pressures when you were in the OB's office, a place
Hmm.
you really didn't want to be because you wanted to have a home birth. So it all makes sense to me that you had, had that happen. So let's dive
Hmm.
on back into your story because obviously you didn't know this at the time. You didn't have someone like me to kind of tell you this or advocate for you in a different way, but you had an amazing story anyways, an amazing birth anyways in the hospital.
Hmm.
But this is what I want to say to people. It's also like, yeah, I don't even know where to start here, but don't just trust this, OBs and midwives just kind of, funneling you into this narrow kind of this is the way to go. Right. And I know that you did it
Hmm.
totally your own way because he obviously the OB wanted to induce you at the get-go and you were like, hang on here. So tell us about that
Hmm.
conversation. What happened?
So I guess I should say what also was contributing to, I believe, my stress and the high blood pressure readings. I mean, they were even bringing up, they were finding issues, the OB was before I had even switched over to the home birth. It was like, okay, well, that's not an issue. Well, maybe this is an issue. So one day he measured my belly, and said, "Oh, you're measuring way behind. Your belly should be bigger than this." And I said, "Well, I'm 5 feet tall. My husband's not a tall person. I wouldn't expect that we would have this huge baby." And I said, "Well, is the baby okay?" They did an ultrasound. Baby was perfectly fine. No issues, but your belly's small. So we're probably going to have to induce. And so it was just, if it wasn't one thing, it was another. So I went a little bit out of order. That was before the blood pressure. So I'm already getting stressed, thinking I have this small baby. Is the baby not being nourished? Um, and so I think that did contribute overall to my stress as well. Um, so anyway, I'm back to OB care and he's wanting to induce. And so I'm asking him, well, what are the risks of induction? You know, and he says, well, it really doesn't increase your risk of C-section or anything like that, but it does increase your chances of having a healthy baby. The baby is safer out than in, is what
That
he
is
kept
just
telling me.
true BS. There are so many risks for mom and baby with induction. But this is the
Mhm.
narrative that they keep on telling women that there's no risk with induction. There's so many risks with induction. And on top of that, there's no long-term or even short-term studies done on moms and babies, what induction actually does long-term and even short-term.
Mhm.
That's scary
Mhm.
shit. That is scary.
Mhm.
I think, and they
It
just
is.
they just pop them out like lollies. He want try was trying to make you have an induction from the get-go, didn't he?
Hmm. And I mean, he tried every tactic. He even said, well, if we induce, we can plan it so that I can be there. Otherwise, it's going to be some doctor that you've never even met, because they have like a rotation.
Mm.
And he was only on service, I think once every 7 days or so. um and he said, well, if we induce, I can guarantee that I'll be there at the birth. And I said, well, that doesn't matter to me. I mean, clearly you're not even, being supportive of, the type of birth that I want. So it doesn't matter who's going to be there. So he tried every angle. At one point he did say he thought, my baby was at risk. Um, and I said, well, at risk how? And he said, well, you could lose the baby. And I'm
What?
like,
Just
but
out of the blue. From
yeah, it was
what?
like, well, he was saying because of the small size, he was saying the baby might not be getting nourished. And and again, I'm like, well, is the baby showing any signs of distress? No, nothing. Baby was
No. And he had
perfectly
done,
healthy the whole
yeah,
pregnancy.
and he had done an ultrasound when he did when he scared you the first time about, you measuring small, which by the way, oh my God, women carry babies so differently. Some carry them really in the front. Some carry them really in the back, barely show they're
Mm-hmm.
pregnant. It's very interesting how women are
Mm-hmm.
so differently designed. And of course, we're different in size and genetics. I mean, oh my God. Anyways, if you're concerned, if you're really measuring like way out of the curve, then you do an ultrasound and you check. And ultrasounds are not really great. I'm not a great fan of them, but what they definitely can
Mm-hmm.
show is the flow from the placenta to the baby. And if it's a good flow, especially that is a key thing to look for. The flow from the placenta to the baby through the umbilical cord, if that is flowing fine, your baby's getting enough nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not measuring
Mm-hmm.
extremely, extremely like super duper intrauterine growth restriction, which is very few babies who
Right.
have that. And you would see that, you
Right.
know. But if
Right.
it's small for gestational
Right.
age, I wouldn't take that as gospel that your baby's not doing great. Usually it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, look at the placenta's perfusion and the umbilical cord, the flow through there. And obviously that was
Mm-hmm.
fine. So, oh God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So of course he's wanting to induce, and he knew my birth plan. I mean, we were looking at it together. I had it typed up. Um, and I said, well, doc, if you induce me, I can kiss this whole birth plan goodbye. And you know that. And he said, yeah, he admitted, he did admit that. He said, yeah, your chances of, not requesting an epidural and not needing, Pitocin to keep labor going. And he said, yeah, that probably is correct. Um, and so I just said, that's not going to work for me. So I agreed to twice weekly non-stress tests. So I would come in, they would hook me up, listen to the baby for 20 minutes. And then I would go down to the lab. They would do blood work to check for preeclampsia. They would take urine, check for protein in my urine. And I did that twice a week until the baby was born. And everything was always perfect. Everything was, the only thing that was a little bit borderline was still my blood pressure, but only when I was in the office.
Yeah.
And then I will also say something that I did. Well, I did a lot of things to control the blood pressure at the end. But I started the brewer's diet
Good.
immediately.
Great.
I did. And I followed it very strictly. So I was eating super high protein, following his whole protocol. I started swimming every day, just light kind of paddling in the water, wading in the water, swimming. What else did I do? I did meditations.
Beautiful.
So I would lay in bed in a dark room, headphones in, and just listen to these meditation tracks. Really try and connect with baby, and just, making sure baby was okay. And I really think, I think that was the biggest thing,
Yeah,
honestly, was just slowing down,
that's it.
connecting with baby.
That's what
Yeah.
all women need to
Um,
do in the end of pregnancy, whether they have high blood pressure or not. That's just what you need to do.
mhm.
Mm.
And I think it assured me that baby was okay. I
Mm.
really think, um, we didn't know it at the time, but it was a girl. But I really think she was communicating with me, just letting me know that I'm okay. I'm okay in here, mom.
Yeah.
Even though they're telling me baby's too small, blood pressure's high, we need to induce all these things. It was like I just shut out the noise,
Yeah.
and the baby was like, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. You
Um,
trusted your own inner wisdom, mama intuition. And I think that's so important.
mhm,
So important to let
mhm,
that be your truest guide. And then, of course, tune into, do you trust the experts around you? You know, if you do, then listen to
mhm,
their advice. If you don't, then listen to yourself.
mhm.
Mm.
Absolutely. I also did chiropractic adjustments twice a week. I did acupuncture twice a week.
Mm.
Um, Actually, foot reflexology was really cool. I did a couple of those appointments. But I really think all of that helped me toward the end to just slow down, you know, just listen to myself, shut out all the noise. Um, and like I said, I was able to stop working. I'm very thankful for that. And just it kind of gave me the time I needed to just settle in, listen to my body, listen to my baby, before she arrived. So that's what I was busy with in those last few weeks.
So let's dive on into your birth story now. Did you have any
All
early
right.
signs of labor approaching for you?
I had Braxton Hicks pretty consistently from probably 16 weeks. Um, but I really didn't have any like pre-labor. I still just kind of had my Braxton Hicks regularly all the way up until the end. I remember thinking the day I went into labor, I thought, man, I'm going to be pregnant forever because I'm not having any signs. I feel like I hear about women having um, at least some slightly stronger contractions than Braxton Hicks, signaling that labor's approaching. And I just had none of that. So I thought, okay, I'm fully prepared to go 41, 42 weeks. And I kind of had prepared myself that way from the beginning, from listening to your podcast and reading books. I knew that a lot of first time moms and second and third time moms, don't give birth at 40 weeks. So I just kind of mentally prepared myself. Okay, we're gonna be past that. In fact, I had even told myself we're gonna have a March baby because my due date was February 21st. So I thought, yeah, we're not even gonna have a February baby. It'll be March. Anyway, so it was the day that I went into labor. I was real busy that day. I shoveled some snow. We had just gotten a big snowstorm. I did a lot of nesting around the house, organizing, cleaning the floors. Just I felt a strong nesting, urgency. So I guess
Well,
that
that's an
was
early
a sign.
sign, isn't it?
That,
That's a sign of labor
and of,
approaching.
yeah, of course I didn't know it at the time. I just thought this place is a mess. We need to clean it up. Um, so I was just busy that day. It was the first day, I think, of my whole pregnancy that I didn't take a nap, of course. Because I had always made time for a nap, and the one day that I didn't, and I remember thinking, boy, I hope I don't go into labor tonight because I didn't take a nap. But sure enough, my husband and I went to bed that night, and I'm not kidding you, my head hit the pillow, and I had my first contraction. And I just knew. I was like, this was not a Braxton Hicks. This is it. Um, but I didn't tell my husband. I just kind of laid there quietly till he fell asleep. I knew he was asleep, and then I snuck out of the room because I knew I just wanted to labor by myself. I didn't want anyone watching me. I didn't want him worrying about me. Um, and so I just snuck out into the living room and put on some music and just kind of started doing my thing.
Mm, beautiful. So let's
So
take us
yeah,
through the early hours of labor then.
yeah. So it was like I said, labor started about it was 9:30 p.m. Snuck out into the living room probably about 10. I just had the dogs out there. I put some Chuck's pads on the couch just in case. I hadn't had any waters leaking or anything like that, but just in case. And I just kind of got into a groove. I would just kind of let my body go limp during the contractions, and they started pretty strong. They were regular and strong from the very first one. Um, it wasn't like, oh, one contraction every 30 minutes or so. It was like they were solidly 10 minutes apart from the very first one. Um, and I just remember my mother-in-law had told me something, and she gave birth to 12 children. And my own mother, yeah, my own mother has 8 children. So I come from, a long line of big families. But I remember my mother-in-law told me something. She said, your body would birth this baby even if you were in a coma.
Yes.
And I just
Whoop, whoop,
remember,
whoop. That is the truth to remember.
and she had told me that very early in my pregnancy, when I was, oh, I'm nervous. I don't know if I can do this. And she said that, and I don't even think she thought much of it when she said it, but it like stuck with me. And I think it was kind of in my subconscious the whole time, because I remember when I was having those early contractions, I would just let my body go just completely limp, ragdoll. And I mean, everything from my mouth all the way down to my toes. And I just remember thinking my body would birth this baby, whether I was, you know, doing anything or not.
Yeah.
It's happening.
I love that. So when you say you go limp, are you lying on the couch? What position are you in when you do this?
At the time, I was hands and knees on the couch. That was always my preferred position throughout labor, was just forward. I never
Yeah.
wanted to be lying back. I always wanted to be forward. So whether I was hands and knees or draped over, the back of the couch, or even I would come into the kitchen and have a snack during a contraction, I would just kind of drape myself over the kitchen counter and just, go limp. Um, yeah. And I remember, can't remember who it was on probably one of your podcasts. I heard that if you do the, what is it, the horse lips, where you just let your lips kind of go limp, and um, start there and go all the way down through your body. That was just really what I focused on. It was
Mm.
just doing nothing.
I love that so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing that did actually help me a lot in early labor was a TENS unit. Um, I had heard someone on some birth story mentioned it. So I put that on my lower back, and I would feel a contraction coming, and I would just turn it on a little bit. And it just, I don't know, it provided a little bit of almost distraction
That's
from
it.
the sensation.
That's it. That's exactly
And
what it does.
yeah, and I didn't have back labor, um, but I did put it on my back, and it just kind of distracted me. And that I used that thing pretty much right up until we went to the hospital. And then it was like, okay, I get this off of me. I don't want this anywhere near me. It's funny how a switch just flipped. But yeah, so I labored through the night. Um, just me and the dogs hanging out. I had some music going. It was just, the house was dark. It was really peaceful. I think I was kind of pretending I was going to have a home birth. And I was kind of like, I was trying to kind of enjoy the experience how I would have if I was having a home birth. Um, so it was really peaceful, and it was a good memory, of labor. Um, and then actually my TENS unit ran out of battery. And I'm like, oh no, I need this, because I had kind of started becoming a little bit dependent on it. Um, so I think at this point it was 2 a.m. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to wake my husband up to go get batteries. But I remembered my brother was a bartender at the time, and I thought, oh, I bet the bar is closing. I'm going to call him, see if he can grab some batteries. So I called him. I said, Philip, I'm in labor. Can you bring me some batteries? I need these. He's like, of course. So he shows up with the batteries, and it ended up being really sweet. He sat in the kitchen with me for a good couple hours. My younger brother, I think at the time he was, yeah, he must have been 25. Just a young guy helping his sister, just coaching me. You're doing a great job. You keep breathing. You're doing a great job. So it was just kind of special, that I got to have um, that little moment with him, in labor.
That is
Um,
so special. I mean, wow, for him to have that experience as a 25-year-old man, for the day, but potentially when
mhm.
he gets to support his partner in having a baby, that is amazing.
Yep.
What a gift you give
Yeah.
him, actually.
Yep. Absolutely. So yeah, so he hung out with me until I decided it was time to wake my husband up. Things were starting to ramp up. It was I was still, talking between contractions, but it was getting more, I could just tell things were progressing, you know. Um, so he took off. I went and woke my husband up. You know, babe, I've been in labor all night. And he's like, what? You're in labor? You know, what? Why didn't you tell me? You know, I said, because I didn't want you to, you know, panic and rush me to the hospital. And not that I think he would have. He's he's really the calm. He's the calm in my storm.
Mhm.
Um, but I said, I think it's time, you know, so let's start packing up the car and put the dogs away, you know, do all the things. So we headed to the hospital about, I think it was about 7 a.m. at this point. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah. So should we just keep going from there?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So it was 7 a.m. and my goal had always been to stay home as long as humanly possible. Um, like I wanted to feel like the baby was coming before I headed to the hospital. It's just from listening to podcasts and birth stories. I knew that once you get to the hospital, that's when they start wanting to do things. They start wanting to intervene.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, if I'm not there, then they can't do anything, you know? So if I walk in the doors, you know, with a baby coming out, then, you know, they can't try to give me pitocin and check me, and I just didn't want all those things. So I knew it was time to go when I started feeling like, okay, we might have this baby in the car. And you know, at the time I didn't, you know, this is my first time doing this, so I don't know actually how far along I am. Looking back now, I'm like, okay, I still had a little bit of time, but you know, I think I'll know better for next time. But we get to the hospital. My husband, you know, helps me in through the ER door, and I get situated, and they have like a little labor and delivery triage in the ER, and right away they're wanting to check me, and I didn't want to be checked. I don't want fingers in me. I don't want anyone touching me,
Yeah.
let alone checking me. So I just, you know, I had my eyes closed, head down. I don't think I had even opened my eyes from the time we left our home. So my husband had guided me. It was bright out. It was 7 a.m. and my eyes were closed, head was down. I think I even had a hood pulled up over me. And I was just in my own world, you know, and I didn't want anyone taking me out of that. And so they kept saying, well, we need to check you. We need to make sure you're in labor. I said, oh no, I'm in labor. I'm definitely in labor, you know. And it was a solid hour of arguing about doing a cervical check. Yeah. Um, and I just kept saying no thank you, no thank you. And I never opened my eyes. I couldn't even tell you what the girl asking to check me, I couldn't even tell you what she looked like. That's how in my own world I was. um, so they went and got the medical director. He came down. You know, it's policy, we have to check you, we cannot admit you to a room until without a cervical check. And I looked this man in the eye and I said, I think it was the one time I actually came out of my zone. I looked this man in the eye and I said, then we're having a baby right here in the ER. And he immediately said, get this woman a room.
I love that. Oh my God. And this is the thing. This is how powerful you have to be in yourself, you know. You kept to yourself. You didn't engage much. You just said no thank you, no thank you. And you literally that's all you have to say. You don't have to argue. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to explain yourself. I want everyone to hear this because the good girl in most women will want to explain and excuse themselves. You don't have to. You know, if this is your reality for some reason that you have to or choose to birth in hospital, like literally this is how you stand ground. You keep your bodily integrity and you just say no thank you. and that's all you have to do.
Hmm.
So I love that because in the US, to do that, very few women do because they're used to being able to harass you into complying.
Hmm.
And that is not informed consent, that is obstetric violence and forced consent.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. Yep. Um, and all the while I was in the ER, they were also trying to get me to agree to an IV. I kept saying no, thank you. What else? They just wanted to do all
All
the
the
things
things.
as soon
Yeah.
as I got there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying no, thank you. Just stay away from me. Just no, thank you. I did let them listen to the baby because they wanted to get some heart tones on the baby. So I said, that's fine. She hooked me up. She let me I say let. Isn't that terrible?
Yes.
The language that we use.
Mm.
Um, but I say she let me, continue laboring in the position that I wanted. And she hooked up the monitor, listened to the baby for about, 20 minutes. Everything sounded great. But other than that, I didn't let them do anything. No IV, obviously no cervical checks. I stayed in my own clothes. I didn't want to get into a hospital gown. So anyway, they magically were able to admit me to a room in labor and delivery. Imagine that. Um, but we get up there, we get situated, and again, I'm in my zone. And at this point, I had told my husband, call my mom. I need my mom. Originally, I didn't think. I thought, oh no, it'll just be my husband and I. I don't need my mom. I'm a grown woman. But sure enough, I was like, okay, I'm ready for my mom. So she showed up. She and my husband are just supporting me. Um, it just, yeah, my mom was, I think, rubbing my legs, maybe rubbing my lower back. They were just kind of taking turns, you know, just doing whatever I needed at the time, which wasn't a whole lot. I mostly just kind of wanted to be left alone.
Mm.
Um, of course, the requests for cervical checks continued. I would have thought they would have gotten the memo by the time I got up there. But the nurse kept saying, we really need to check you. We need to know how far along you are. And I said, this baby's going to come when this baby wants to come. It's you fingering me is not going to make the baby come any faster. If anything, it's going to make me shut down
Yes.
and we're going to be here a lot longer.
Mm.
So I kept saying no, thank you, and this nurse was not happy with me whatsoever. Um, I also wouldn't let her hook me up to the continuous fetal monitoring because I didn't want to be stuck. I didn't want to be stuck on the bed. I wanted to be able to move freely, and I couldn't do that with this cumbersome monitoring system on
Yeah.
me.
And having a CTG
So,
on just increases your risk of everything, of cesarean, of epidural, of instrumental birth, of so
mhm.
many things. Scalp electrode on your baby, like with almost 99% certainty, which is a
Oh,
screw into your baby's head. So yeah, I
oh.
think CTGs have, yeah, you should not have CTGs in labor. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. So again, she was not happy about that. So I did agree to her coming in once every hour and listening to the baby with a handheld Doppler for 5 minutes every
Beautiful.
hour.
Lovely.
So as I said, as long as I don't even want to know that you're there, as long as you're not taking me out of my zone, then you can do that. And she, as much as she didn't like it, she did do it, and she'd get underneath me. If I was hunched over or on my hands and knees, she'd get under there and, find the baby's heart rate, and baby was doing fine. So we
That's
just
it.
kept on like that.
And that's how
Mm-hmm.
you do it. Like, gosh, you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
change your position for a Doppler.
Um, yeah, so we kept going like that for the next few hours. Um, I would mostly be on hands and knees. Sometimes I'd be draped over the bed. Like I said, at this point, the TENS unit was not helpful at all. I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I can't believe I ever liked this, but I think I was hitting transition maybe.
Yeah. And in
Um,
transition, nothing feels good. Transition is the time where it doesn't matter where you are, what position you use, what anyone else is doing. It's when you have
mhm.
a mini freak out.
Yes. And I remember my mom saying, kind of whispering to my husband, I remember her saying, I don't think she's quite in transition. She's still aware of us. Or she said something along those lines, like she's still aware of us. And I remember thinking, oh no, I must have I must have hours to go, if I'm not even in transition. Um, so my mom did at one point, she said, honey, why don't we, would you be okay with a cervical check just so you know where you're at? And I said, okay, if my mom's saying it, then that's fine. And so at this point, I was consenting to a cervical check, and I did want one. So we called the nurse back in, and my mom said she would like a cervical check. This nurse, I can't believe I didn't report her, but she looked at me and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, you said you didn't want cervical checks." And I said, "I would like a cervical check now, please." And she goes, "Oh, no, I wouldn't want to make you do anything you're uncomfortable with. I'm not going to do that."
Oh,
And I
wow.
said,
Ugh.
I said, "I would like a cervical check." And she just kind of laughed and said, "Okay." It was like this power move. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, it was not
Yeah.
nice.
And
Um,
unfortunately, that is not uncommon. That is how
mhm,
women are treated when they're declining and having a voice in the system.
So it almost felt like a punishment,
Yeah, of course.
like, like a
Who are
punishment for
you?
not
Who are
complying.
you thinking that you can decide what you can and cannot do in here? This is our territory. Who do you think you are?
Hmm.
A sovereign
Hmm.
woman? No, little girl, little sweetheart. You're not a sovereign woman, not in
Yep.
our turf.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So she did end up checking me, and she said I was 9.5 centimeters. So, but I wasn't feeling pushy. I wasn't feeling the urge. And I knew I do not want to push if I don't feel the urge.
No.
Um,
And again,
mm,
so just because you're 9.5 centimeters, that doesn't mean you're ready to push. Even if you're 10
mhm,
centimeter, doesn't mean you're ready to push. The head
mhm,
needs to drop down into a certain position in your pelvis that makes you have that involuntary urge to push. And for some reason,
mhm,
this is information that most midwives and doctors have either just they didn't hear it when they learned about the physiology of birth,
mhm,
or they forgot it.
mhm. Yep. So, um, so at that point, I was wanting to labor at the end of the bed, kind of, how the bed drops down on the end, how the foot of the bed can drop down. So I was on that. My husband was behind me, sitting on a rolling stool type of thing. And during a contraction, I would get forward on my hands and knees, just go limp, ragdoll, breathing through it. And then between contractions, I was getting pretty exhausted at this point. Um, so I would lean back into him, and I believe that's one of the pictures I sent you. Um, was between contractions. I would kind of fall back into his arms, and he would support my weight in a squat. I'd regroup for the next one, and we'd go into the next contraction. Um, and like I said, I hadn't been feeling pushy um, up until maybe, so we had gotten to the hospital at 7 a.m. It was about 12 p.m. So it was noon. So I had only been at the hospital, maybe 5 hours, laboring like this. So I remember telling my mom, I said, I'm starting to feel pushy, but we're not going to tell anyone. And she said, okay, I won't tell anyone. Because I didn't want them all coming in the room and she's pushing, and, a big production of it. I didn't want coached pushing. Um, So we kept our little secret for a while. I would just kind of, I would feel during a contraction, I would feel a little bit pushy, and I give it a little, I never purple pushed. I never did counted pushing or like conscious pushing. I would just kind of wait for a contraction, and I'd give it a little oomph at the end of the contraction, just kind of a little, but I never really pushed. Um, and then I don't know if my mom saw something, or maybe just in the way that maybe the sounds I was making, because she had, you know, 8 natural births. So she knows, what it sounds like. And she said, okay, I'm getting the nurse, we're doing this. And so the nurse comes in, and of course they're wanting me to get on my back to push. Get on your back. You can't birth the baby, on your hands and knees. And I said, yes, I can. And so I stayed on my hands and knees, and I kind of kept doing my thing like that. Doctor wasn't in there yet. And they kept trying to get on your back, we need to see what's going on. And I just kind of ignored them, to be honest. I don't even remember replying at that point.
I'm just like, in our modern day and age, I just can't understand the incompetence amongst midwives and doctors, especially in the US, with these stories of wanting women on their backs and pushing for that. They can look when you're on your all fours. Like, you can see plenty. Like, you don't have to have your, no. What? Why?
I know. And I had even, my sister actually did give birth on her hands and knees, and she had told me how much better it felt, because this was her 3rd child. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. That seems like a more natural position, I don't know, than being on your back. So I think that was and it was what just felt best to me. I'm like, this is what has felt good all through labor. Why am I going to change it now? But anyway, so I think pushing, which, like I said, I never really pushed. I told them not to coach me. I said, don't count, don't tell me when to push, and they were pretty good about that. They didn't. They gave me some encouragement, but not really coached pushing, I would say. I did end up on my side when the baby actually was born. But I never wanted to be on my back. But yeah, I just I was trying to wait for the fetal ejection reflex. I had heard about that somewhere along the line on some podcast, and I just thought that'd be really cool to experience, and I did. I mean, she was coming out whether I was having anything to do with it or not. I remember someone describing it as vomiting, but the other direction.
Your vagina.
And that is really, yes, that is really how it felt. Yeah, she came out after, like I said, it was maybe a half hour, 45 minutes of that stage. And yeah, she was born, and we didn't know it was a girl. And I don't even remember thinking at the time, what gender is it? It didn't even cross my mind. She was just on my chest, and I was just so happy to have my baby. And a good few minutes had gone by, and one of the nurses says, well, Dad, are you going to tell us what it is? And he said, oh yeah, I forgot. And he's trying to wipe his tears and see what it is. And sure enough, he told me it was a girl, and it was the happiest moment of my life, for sure.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That really goes to show, I have assisted women within the hospital system, and obviously I've interviewed women like yourself who have had a natural and empowering birth in the hospital, and it's definitely possible. But it really takes a woman like yourself who is knowledgeable and who's very anchored in what she wants, and that she's anchored before she steps on into labor and birth, like to do your education before, for anyone listening
Mm-hmm.
who maybe has to have a hospital birth for some kind of true medical reason, not
Mm-hmm.
like a big baby or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that, because if you do that, then you call me. You do not have a big baby in hospital, for example. But if that's the reality though. Like not every woman will have a natural
Mm-hmm.
birth, like without medication or help from the obstetricians. I mean, most can,
Mm-hmm.
but some will not. That's just how it is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but what you can do is that I have a free resource it's an ebook that has all the routine hospital birth procedures. So women can know all about the things that you knew about now walking in and make informed decisions about, no, like I don't want to have vaginal examinations, or no, I'm declining the CTG, or I'm declining this and that, and make informed decisions and really anchor that deeply with you and your husband or whoever's going to be with you in the birth. And then just
Mm-hmm.
stand your ground. Just say no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And people might get
Mm-hmm.
irritated around you, but you can just close your eyes, go into your bubble, and just continue doing your thing. And just you can just have this deep trust in yourself. You go like, well, I know. And you know if something
Mm-hmm.
deviates from the normal, then you can make other decisions. But
Mm-hmm.
if, like with you, like you have this beautiful, natural, straightforward birth, there was nothing at all
Mm-hmm.
that was deviating that needed something. So they could,
Mm-hmm.
definitely just be fully hands off and you could just do your thing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
possible. It's even more possible if you bring in, sacred birth worker or doula that can really advocate
Yeah.
too. But
Yeah.
you were such a great
Mm-hmm.
advocate for yourself, though.
Well, and I really, it's honestly, I owe that so much of that to podcasts like yours, I mean, and all the women who've been willing to share their stories. And I truly I don't think I would have known that I could do it, or known how to decline certain things, or to know that certain things are normal and don't need intervention. How would anyone know that, and I just think women aren't given all the information, and they definitely aren't trusted.
No,
The obstetricians don't trust women
no,
to know their body and to know their baby. And yeah, it's really a disservice to women, and it makes me
massively.
sad.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Maternity system today is truly where the patriarchy is held the strongest in our society, and women don't really know
Hmm.
it unless they go through it and then they wake up to it. It is
Hmm.
There's infantilization of women, treating women like children, calling them
Hmm.
sweetheart like they did to you.
Hmm.
Oh, sweetheart. And mocking
Hmm.
you and
Hmm.
not accepting you as a sovereign being, saying, this is my decision. There's
Hmm.
that something happens when women fall pregnant in our society. That's so crazy. The maternity system treats you so differently from if you would walk into the doctor at any other time in your life. And
Hmm.
that's why it's so important for women to realize that and take their power back by being informed and making informed decisions and not just
Hmm.
going along for the ride. And
Hmm.
it's possible. You
Yep.
are a beautiful example of that. So if you had a first time mama in front of you right now who's about to have her first baby and she really wants to have a natural and empowering birth experience, what advice and pearls of wisdom would you give to her?
Well, you kind of alluded to it before. I think you said your preparation can't start when you go into labor, right? And that you can't change your mindset, when you go into labor. It has to start, at least from when you find out you're expecting, if not before. You need to decide what kind of birth you want, what kind of birth experience you want this to be for you and your baby. And just know that you can do it. You have everything in you that you need to do it. You don't need a doctor to tell you how it's going to happen, or what to do, or how he's going to help you get this baby out. You have everything that you need to birth this baby. And And like I said, come up with a plan, and you don't need a plan B. I think that was a big thing. A lot of people were telling me, well, make sure you're not too, set on this plan, because things can happen and you might need to shift gears. And I said, well, if I have to, I will, you know,
Yeah.
but this is my plan and this is what I'm doing. And you can do it. You can. If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And like my mother-in-law said, your body would do this whether you had any say in it or not. So let your body do what it was made to do.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your birth story. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It was so wonderful to talk to you. I feel like I'm talking to an old friend. I heard your voice when I was in labor. I really did. Your voice is just so calming, and I know. I feel like I'm talking. I want your autograph. Is that weird?
Oh, that's beautiful.
I do.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you love this podcast, then please consider sharing it, leave a review, or make a contribution on our Patreon page. And if you want to connect on social media, then find the podcast on Instagram as The Natural Birth Podcast. Thank you for listening.